It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. I was sitting at my kitchen counter in Austin, halfway through my morning coffee, when my phone buzzed. Mom's name flashed across the screen. For a second, I smiled, thinking maybe she was checking in, maybe things were finally softening between us after months of silence. I swiped to open the message. "You're no longer welcome in this family." 10 words. No explanation, no punctuation beyond the cold finality of that period. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could have asked why, could have demanded an answer, but I didn't. I typed 2 words. "All right then," and hit send. The air in my apartment felt heavier, the quiet louder than usual. I waited for a follow-up, a call, a guilt trip, something. Nothing came, just that final text hanging like a closing door. My first reaction wasn't anger, it was clarity. It wasn't the first time Mom had drawn a line, but it was the first time I didn't beg to step back over it. I sat there staring at my reflection in the black surface of my coffee. 33 years old, financially stable, independent, and somehow still the family scapegoat. My phone stayed silent, but my mind didn't. Every memory started replaying itself every time I'd swallowed my pride to keep the peace. Every time I'd accepted less love, less space, less acknowledgement just to belong. And now, this text, simple, final, almost sterile, felt like the inevitable conclusion. I wasn't blindsided. Deep down, I think I'd been waiting for it. Waiting for the moment, Mom finally said what she'd been implying for years. I stood up, poured the rest of my coffee down the sink, and looked out at the skyline. For the first time, I didn't feel panic at the thought of being cut off. I felt something closer to relief. Because maybe, just maybe, I was free now from their expectations, their judgments, their version of family that had never really included me. Still, part of me wondered how it had come to this. What turned a daughter into an outsider? What turned a mother's love into a weapon? The truth wasn't sudden, it had been building all along. Looking back, the signs were always there. My family's love was the kind that came with conditions, obedience, silence, and gratitude for crumbs. As a kid, I didn't notice it. I thought all parents played favorites, that every older sibling was expected to give more and get less. But over time, the cracks widened. Holidays were the worst. My brother, Mason, always got the spotlight. New bike, new shoes, front seat in every photo. I got practicality sweaters on sale, a polite, "thanks for helping clean up." Birthdays weren't celebrations, they were reminders of my place. Mom would bake a cake for Mason, invite the neighbors, fill the house with laughter. Mine? A card on the kitchen counter and a rushed hug before she went back to work. I told myself it didn't matter. I was strong, independent, the responsible one. But it mattered. It always did. Mom used to say I was too sensitive, that I took things the wrong way. When she criticized my choices, my major in college, my career in marketing instead of law, I was told it was tough love. When Mason failed a class, it was, he's finding his way. When I got promoted, it was, don't brag. Somehow, everything I did right was invisible, and everything I questioned was disrespect. By my 20s, I'd learned to keep my distance. Calls turned into texts, visits into obligations. Still, I tried. I sent gifts for holidays, made the drive for family dinners, ignored the tight smiles and colder hugs. I thought if I just worked harder, achieved more, maybe they'd see me differently. But love in our family wasn't earned, it was rationed. I remember one Christmas in particular. Mason had just lost his job. Mom sat beside him, holding his hand, promising to cover his rent. I'd brought homemade gifts and a bottle of wine from a trip I'd saved for months to take. She barely looked up when I walked in. "You should help your brother," she said, like it was obvious. That's when I realized it didn't matter how much I gave. It would never be enough. So, when that text came years later, I knew it wasn't sudden. It was just the echo of a pattern I'd been living in all along. Mason was the son our parents orbited around. 3 years younger, reckless, charming, and untouchable. From the moment he could talk, Mom called him her little miracle, like his existence made up for every shortcoming she saw in me. When he broke things, I got scolded for not watching him. When he lied, I was blamed for setting a bad example. It didn't matter what happened. Somehow, it was always my fault. Mason could crash Dad's car and Mom would sigh, saying, "He's just a boy, he'll learn." But if I came home 5 minutes past curfew, it turned into a lecture about respect and responsibility. He never lifted a finger around the house, yet I was the one called lazy if the dishes weren't done. I used to think he didn't notice the favoritism, that he was just basking in it without understanding, but he knew. He learned how to weaponize it early, flashing that innocent grin whenever he wanted something. When we were kids, he'd steal from my allowance, and if I protested, Mom would snap, "Stop being selfish. He's your brother." As we grew older, it only got worse. Mason drifted from one mess to another, failed classes, bad jobs, toxic relationships, and every time the family rallied around him. Mom would call me in tears saying, "He's struggling, can you help?" I'd send money, lend him my car, even let him crash on my couch. He'd leave behind empty beer bottles and excuses. Then, when he didn't get what he wanted, he'd twist the story. "She's cold, she thinks she's better than us." And Mom believed him, every time. It was exhausting trying to play peacekeeper in a family that didn't want peace, only loyalty to their narrative. The more Mason messed up, the more they blamed me for not supporting him enough. It was twisted, unfair, but predictable. He could burn down a house, and somehow I'd be accused of striking the match. Over time, I stopped trying to compete for approval. Let him be the favorite. Let them call me distant. Loving Mason felt like hugging a cactus, painful and pointless. But the worst part wasn't that they chose him, it's that I kept hoping, foolishly, they'd choose me too one day. It happened at Dad's retirement party, a big family gathering at the community hall, complete with banners, buffet trays, and a rented karaoke machine that no one wanted to admit was Mom's idea. I'd spent the week helping plan it, booked the venue, coordinated the caterer, even paid for the custom cake. But when the night arrived, my name wasn't on the program. The speech I wrote was given to Mason. I stood there in the crowd, champagne glass in hand, listening as he stumbled through words I'd written, barely glancing at the paper. Mom beamed at him like he'd just won an award. Dad nodded, proud and oblivious. When Mason finished, the applause was loud and genuine. My chest tightened. No one looked my way. No thank you, no acknowledgement, just laughter and clinking glasses. I smiled through it, but something cracked deep inside. After years of swallowing resentment, pretending it didn't sting, the silence that night was deafening. Later, as guests danced, Mom pulled me aside. "You look upset," she said, her tone clipped. "Can't you just be happy for your brother?" I wanted to scream. Be happy? For what? For being erased again? For doing the work and watching someone else get the credit? Instead, I just nodded. "Of course, Mom, that's what I always did. Smile, comply, disappear." But something shifted in me that night. The mask I'd worn for so long started to crumble. I left early, slipped out without saying goodbye, and sat in my car in the parking lot, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't recognize the woman staring back, tired eyes, forced smile, pretending she wasn't breaking. I realized then that love in our family was conditional, a currency traded for obedience. I'd been paying in silence for years, and the price had finally become too high. That night, I made a quiet promise to myself: no more begging for a seat at a table that was never meant for me. The breaking point wasn't loud or dramatic. It was calm, cold, the kind of stillness that comes right before everything changes. By the time I turned 22, I'd learned that the only person I could truly count on was myself. While Mason was still drifting between community college majors and crashing on couches, I was balancing 2 part-time jobs, night classes, and ramen for dinner. I put myself through school without a cent from Mom or Dad. No one helped me fill out FAFSA forms. No care packages arrived during finals. Just the occasional passive-aggressive text from Mom about how I never called enough. After graduation, I landed a marketing internship that paid next to nothing, but I made it work. I shared a 1-bedroom with a friend and built a portfolio from scratch, taking freelance gigs no one else wanted. I'd work until midnight, sleep 5 hours, and do it all over again. And slowly, step by step, I climbed. By 28, I was a full-time brand strategist at a mid-size firm in Austin. I saved every bonus check, skipped vacations, and drove the same used car I bought at 19. 2 years later, I bought my first home, a modest but modern townhouse with clean lines, good light, and a small patch of backyard that felt like gold. I remember the day I got the keys. I called Mom, hoping maybe this would be the moment she saw me, that she'd say, "I'm proud of you." But all she said was, "That's nice. Did you hear Mason's thinking about starting his own business?" Like always, my milestones were footnotes to his messes. No matter what I achieved, it wasn't enough. I didn't live close enough, I didn't show up enough, I didn't sacrifice enough. The truth was, they didn't want me to succeed, they wanted me available, quiet, useful. I learned how to silence the sting, bury the hurt beneath performance and paychecks. I built a life with no one to applaud me for it, and while I told myself I didn't care, deep down, a part of me still waited for one of them to say, "You did it, you made it on your own." But they never did. It started with a phone call. Mom, frantic as usual, launching into a story before I could even say hello. Mason had lost his job again. His girlfriend had kicked him out. He was trying his best but needed a place to stay. I already knew where this was going. She wanted me to take him in, just for a few weeks. "He's your brother," she said, like that was a reason to burn down my peace. I took a deep breath. "Mom, no, he's 30. I'm not his safety net." There was silence on the other end, then a sharp inhale. Her voice dropped into that cold, clipped register I'd come to dread. "You've always been so selfish." I laughed bitterly. "Selfish? For setting a boundary?" She didn't answer right away. Then, "You think you're better than us now, just because you have your little house and your job." I kept my voice even. "No, I just think I deserve peace, and I'm tired of being punished for working hard." That was it. That was the sentence that tipped the balance. She exploded. Accused me of turning my back on the family, of abandoning Mason, of thinking I was too good for the rest of them. I let her vent, not out of respect, but out of exhaustion. When she finally hung up, I sat in stunned silence. I expected her to cool off, maybe call back with an apology or at least a calmer tone. But instead, the next morning, I woke up to a text. "You're no longer welcome in this family." No, love, Mom. No punctuation beyond the period, just a declaration, a final strike. And my reply was simple. The truth, wrapped in 2 words. All right then. She thought it would break me, that cutting me off would send me crawling back. What she didn't realize was that I'd been walking away long before she ever typed that message. This wasn't a collapse. It was a release. All right then, 2 words. That was my response to a lifetime of being dismissed, guilt, tripped, and used like a spare battery plugged in only when someone else's life needed power. When I sent that text, I didn't cry. I didn't pace my kitchen or scream into a pillow like you might expect. I just sat there, staring at the message thread, watching the read receipt appear beneath my reply, and then nothing. No rebuttal, no backtracking, just silence. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel tension coil in my chest. I didn't start rehearsing what I'd say if she called. I didn't feel guilt seeping in through the cracks. I felt calm. Not happy, not angry, just free. I looked around my apartment, my quiet, warm space filled with things I'd chosen for myself, framed photos, thriving plants, shelves lined with books I loved. There was no chaos here. No one storming in with demands or thinly veiled insults dressed as advice. No brother crashing on my couch. No mother reminding me I owed them more. Just peace. It's funny how finality brings clarity. All those years I spent trying to win them over, to prove I was worthy of love, of respect, of even basic kindness gone in one message. It didn't break me. It clarified everything. That text wasn't a rejection. It was confirmation. That I was never really welcome in the first place, not as I am. Only as the version of me that stayed quiet, gave too much, and asked for nothing. So I chose peace. I turned off notifications. I muted the family group chat that had turned into a shrine for Mason's latest disasters. I unfollowed, unplugged, and breathed. This wasn't spite. It wasn't revenge. It was self-preservation. A choice to stop begging for crumbs from a table that had always been set for someone else. Let them call me cold. Let them say I walked away. They'll never understand what it took to stay as long as I did. The calm didn't last forever. Grief snuck in the back door, quiet and uninvited. It came during the slow moments folding laundry, waiting for the kettle to boil, walking past the birthday card aisle at the grocery store. Not for what was, but for what was supposed to be. I didn't miss them exactly. I missed the idea of them. The version of family I'd clung to in my head, the kind that showed up, that saw you, that said, "I'm proud of you," without conditions. That version never existed, but letting go of it still hurt. Some nights, I'd catch myself wondering, Would they have treated me differently if I had just stayed quiet? If I had given Mason what he wanted? If I had let Mom believe her version of events? But that wasn't love, that was control. The grief wasn't linear, it came in waves. Some days I felt strong, untouchable. Other days I felt 12 years old again, craving a mother's warmth that never quite reached me. It was during one of those nights, curled up on the couch with a glass of wine and a hollow chest, that I texted Danny, my closest friend. She didn't ask questions, she just replied, "Come over." An hour later, I was in her living room, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea while she listened. Really listened. No fixing, no pity, just presence. "I feel like I lost something I never had," I whispered. Danny nodded. "You didn't lose a family. You let go of a fantasy. That takes guts." It landed hard, and true. Later, at her suggestion, I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Bryant. Calm voice. No nonsense. She said something in our second session that stopped me cold. Family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by behavior, by who shows up when it matters. In that moment, something clicked. Maybe I hadn't lost family. Maybe I was finally making space to build one. One I chose. One that chose me back. The days after Mom's text were eerily quiet. No calls, no angry follow-ups, no dramatic relatives showing up at my door with Bible verses and guilt. Just silence, like I'd been deleted from the group chat of their lives. And in a way, I had. The group messages kept going. Birthdays, baby photos, Sunday dinners. But I was no longer tagged, no longer expected. I watched them from the outside, not out of longing but out of observation, like studying a machine I'd finally stepped away from. The only one who reached out was Aunt Lisa, Mom's older sister. We weren't close, not really, but she sent a short text one evening. "I don't know what happened, but I hope you're okay. Just wanted you to know I'm thinking of you." I stared at it for a long time before replying. "I'm okay, just choosing peace." She didn't push, didn't pick sides, just left it there. A quiet acknowledgement that I hadn't imagined at all, that someone had noticed my absence. But the silence didn't mean they forgot me. Oh no. The whispers began to make their way back, through coworkers who knew someone who knew my cousin, through old friends still in touch with my brother's circle. "She's cold. She thinks she's better than us now, after everything her mother did for her." It was laughable, really. I was the villain in a story I never agreed to be in, the one who abandoned family, the one who turned her back. Never mind the years of unpaid emotional labor, the late-night calls, the bailouts, the broken boundaries. I didn't respond, didn't defend myself. I'd spent too long trying to control the narrative, trying to get them to see the truth. Now, I let the silence speak for me. Because deep down, they knew. And the fact that I was no longer playing my part, that I was gone and not groveling, unsettled them more than any outburst ever could. It was a Wednesday when I found out. I was in line at my favorite coffee shop, half awake, scrolling emails, when I saw a message from Tasha, an old mutual friend from high school who still lived in town. We weren't close anymore, but her subject line stopped me cold. "Thought you should know." The email was short and blunt. Mason had been arrested. Something about credit card fraud and an unpaid loan. She'd heard it from her brother who worked at the courthouse. At first, I didn't react. I just stood there, blinking at my screen, the smell of espresso filling the air like nothing had changed. But everything had. I ordered my drink, sat in a booth by the window, and reread the email 3 times. The timeline made sense. The frantic call from Mom, the sudden urgency, the demand that I take Mason in. And then the cutoff. I opened my messages, went back to that last conversation. Her voice in my head, "You're selfish. You think you're better than us." No, I just wouldn't lie down and bleed for a brother who never cleaned up his own mess. And now the truth was out. She hadn't pushed me away because I was disrespectful or ungrateful. She did it because I wouldn't fund his get-out-of-jail plan. I wouldn't be their emergency exit, again. She thought if she exiled me first, it would make me the problem. Easier to paint me as the one who walked away than admit she'd been counting on me to clean up what she wouldn't face. I closed my phone and stared out at the street, people walking by like nothing had shifted. But inside me, something had solidified. This wasn't about family, this was about control, about expectation, about how I was useful until I wasn't. And now that I'd said no, I was disposable. But I'd take truth over fantasy any day, even when it stung. Especially then. I made the appointment that same week. No hesitation. Just a calm, methodical need to put things in place to protect what I'd built. The lawyer's name was Miriam Clark. Early 40s, sharp eyes, the kind of woman who didn't waste words and didn't miss a detail. I'd found her through Danny's referral. She's not warm, Danny had warned. But she's who you want in your corner. Perfect. We sat across from each other in her downtown office, papers stacked between us, my hands folded tight in my lap. I'm not in trouble, I told her. But I want to make sure no one else can make trouble for me. She nodded once, flipped open a folder, and got to work. We started with my will. Simple, direct. Everything goes to charity or close friends, people who actually showed up. Not a single blood relative listed. Then we moved on to account security. Closed an old joint savings account that Mom had opened when I was a teenager, just in case. Changed passwords. Adjusted beneficiaries on my life insurance. Scrubbed my name from any tie they could try to exploit. Every click, every signature felt like a quiet revolution. It was emotional, not because I felt guilty, but because it marked the end of something. A final, invisible umbilical cord being cut. I wanted airtight, I said, handing over the last signed form. No loopholes. Miriam looked at me, the faintest flicker of approval in her expression. You're doing the right thing. You'd be surprised how often family becomes a threat. I wasn't surprised. Not anymore. Walking out of that office, I felt taller, like I'd reclaimed something they'd tried to take from me, not money, but control. I'd spent so much of my life being the fallback plan, the emotional insurance policy, the quiet one who never made waves. Not anymore. Now, if they came for me again, they'd find nothing left to drain. No access, no leverage, no more. The first message came through my cousin Natalie, a Facebook DM I almost didn't open. Hey, just wanted to say your mom's been really upset. She's crying all the time. I don't know what's going on, but she said you cut her out? I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Then I closed the app. The second came a few days later. Uncle Ron, Mom's brother, emailed me directly. Whatever happened, I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. She's your mother. Reach out before it's too late. Each message carried the same weightless guilt. Vague references to what she's going through. No mention of what I'd been through. No curiosity about my side. Just the implication that silence meant cruelty and boundaries meant betrayal. Then came the voicemail. From a blocked number. Her voice, trembling but practiced. You're still our daughter, don't destroy this family. No apology, no acknowledgement of her text, just pressure, emotional blackmail wrapped in maternal concern. I played it twice, then deleted it. They didn't miss me. They missed my usefulness, my compliance, my wallet. They weren't asking me to come back, they were demanding I return to my role, the scapegoat, the fixer, the one who took the punches and smiled through the bruises. But I'd already stepped off that stage. And I wasn't going back. I didn't respond to Natalie. Or Ron. Or the voice behind the blocked number. Because real love doesn't threaten. It doesn't come with strings and ultimatums. If she wanted to rebuild something, she'd have to start with the truth. And she hadn't done that. Not once. It was my cousin Jordan's wedding, one of those big family events I hadn't planned to attend. But Jordan had always been decent, quiet, kind. He sent the invite with a handwritten note that said, "No pressure, I just want you there if you feel safe." That mattered. So I went. The venue was a rustic vineyard on the edge of town, all soft lights and wooden beams. I wore a simple navy dress, kept my head high, and told myself I'd stay an hour long enough to show up, show grace, and slip out before anything ugly surfaced. I wasn't in the building 10 minutes before I saw her. Mom? Standing by the punch bowl in a champagne-colored dress, laughing with an aunt I hadn't seen in years. When her eyes met mine across the room, her expression didn't falter, not even for a second. She smiled like nothing had happened, like she hadn't texted me out of her life, like we were just two guests at the same party. She made her way toward me with small, careful steps, wine glass in hand. "You look beautiful," she said, as if she'd complimented me every day of my life. I gave her a nod. Thanks. There was a pause, a long, heavy silence wrapped in music and murmurs from the rest of the wedding. Then she said it. "I'm glad you came. It's good to have the family together." I looked her straight in the eye. You made it clear I'm not part of this family. Her smile faltered just slightly. Don't be dramatic. That word, that tone, still trying to rewrite history in real time. I'm not, I said evenly. I'm being honest. You ended this, not me. She blinked, caught off guard by the calm in my voice. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I wasn't pleading. I was just done. I wish you well, I added, and then I turned and walked away. There was no scene, no shouting, just a woman who had burned a bridge and didn't expect me to keep walking without her, but I did. And I didn't look back. Healing didn't happen all at once. It came in small, ordinary moments. Sunday brunch with Danny and her partner, laughing over pancakes and inside jokes. Late-night work sessions with my colleague Ray, brainstorming ideas for a project that felt bigger than us. Texts from Aunt Lisa, still checking in, still offering a quiet kind of love I hadn't known I needed. These people weren't bound to me by blood. But they saw me, respected me, celebrated me. And in their presence, I started to realize something. Family isn't who shares your last name. It's who shows up when you don't have anything left to give. It was Danny who first floated the idea. You've got all this experience, all this grit. Why not turn it into something? So I did. I launched a small online platform for women navigating toxic family dynamics. Blog posts, support groups, anonymous forums. A place to be heard. To not feel crazy. To find language for pain that most people are told to swallow. I named it The Table. Because everyone deserves one they're invited to. The community grew faster than I expected. Messages poured in from strangers who felt like sisters. Thank you for writing what I couldn't say. I thought I was the only one. It was work, yes, but it didn't drain me. It fueled me. Every post, every email, every story was a brick in the home I was building, one not rooted in obligation or fear, but choice and truth. My own table was small but strong. Friends, mentors, neighbors who became lifelines. I stopped trying to prove myself to people who only ever saw me through the lens of their own disappointment. Instead, I started showing up for myself. I'd been told for years that I was too much, too cold, too distant. But around my chosen family, I was just enough. And in that space and their warmth, I finally felt something I'd spent my whole life chasing. Home. Every now and then, I still think about that text. The one that started it or ended it, depending on how you look at it. You're no longer welcome in this family. For a long time, those words felt like a brand. A scar I carried in silence. I'd replay them in my head, wondering if I could have worded my reply differently, if I could have softened the blow or patched the cracks that had already splintered beyond repair. But now, when I think about that message, I don't feel pain. I don't feel rage. I smile. Not in bitterness, not in smug satisfaction, just peace. Because the woman I was back then, standing in her kitchen, phone in hand, heart aching from decades of being unseen, she needed that moment. She needed the line to be drawn so she could finally stop trying to erase herself just to fit into a space that was never built for her. They said I wasn't welcome. What they really meant was I wasn't willing to play the part anymore. I wasn't going to apologize for being whole, for being honest, for being free. And I'm not sorry. Not for the silence. Not for the boundaries, not for building a life without them. The truth is, I didn't lose my family that day. I lost the illusion of one. The version I kept holding on to, hoping if I bent just right or stayed quiet long enough they'd finally see me. But they never did, and that's okay. Because what I've built since then, this life, these people, this peace is mine. Authentically, unapologetically mine. I've hosted dinners at the table, laughing with women who once felt just as broken as I did. I've danced in my kitchen with people who know me, not just for what I do, but for who I am. I've celebrated birthdays without waiting for a call that never came. And I've woken up each morning knowing I don't need their acceptance to feel whole. That text used to haunt me. Now it reminds me. I wasn't welcome in their family. But I was always welcome in my own life. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.